that insurance, is it on the vehicle because it's owned by the company, or is it on the individual, or is it on both?
The insurance travels with the vehicle anytime that you have commercial insurance. The vehicles are sometimes owned by drivers, they're sometimes owned by companies, and they're sometimes leased. There's every iteration in there.
Okay, and so when you say they need to play by the same rules, I appreciated that. We're going to bring that up a little later. Thank you.
Councilmember Laster.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, basically this discussion here is an insurance lawyer's paradise, because the very fact that we're debating about who has coverage and who doesn't have coverage and how much coverage and when the coverage starts is, it just makes insurance attorneys giddy, and that's the whole point. I'm going to support the Costello Amendment because I think it gets us down the road, but it doesn't go far enough. I'm going to also proffer in 10 a 24/7 insurance requirement, because, my friends, what we're talking about here is two things: public safety and consumer protection. The public of this city has come to expect this city, in this instance for this regulated industry, to do several things. And it is an expectation that's not limited just to Houston. It's a worldwide expectation now of all transportation industries. They expect that this industry is licensed, that the cars are inspected, that the cars are insured, that there's background checks, that there's metered rates that they can count on, and that there's a governmental agency to which they can go and have a complaint. That is the universal expectation. So what we're doing here is very important, and I think we need to err on the side of more insurance coverage rather than less insurance coverage. I'm going to support the Costello Amendment, and when we get to 10, we're going to argue forcefully that a 24/7 coverage is vital to the protection of the public, and that if we do not move it that way, we will be hearing from the public on far too many instances. So I support the Costello Amendment and look forward to talking to you on the larger issue on items 9 and 10 shortly. Thank you.
Member Pennington.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Laster that it's inevitable, and I think I mentioned this before, that there are going to be issues about when the cars are being used for private purposes and when they're used for commercial purposes. I mean, the line is not clear if they're, or some lawyer could make it unclear, I believe. So I think we need to try to clarify it as much as possible. The second, and maybe you could speak to that issue. The second one is, what is the current situation? We've talked about the fact that the current drivers, except for one exception, I believe, are all considered to be independent contractors. Do they have personal insurance? Do the companies have the insurance? I mean, what is the current situation, and how would what we're possibly doing here today change that?
The ordinance currently requires the companies to be responsible for insurance. Now, some of the companies, as part of the lease, say for example cabs, when they're paying their lease fees to the company, insurance is included in that lease fee, but the permittee is the one that's responsible for it, which is distinguished from what's in the amendment. In the amendment, it would require the driver to go out and purchase it.
That would be the Martin Amendment, not the
That's
amendment.
correct. That's the Martin Amendment.
Okay, and have you talked to any insurance companies about whether they think that there's a difficulty in having the private insurance for some activities and the commercial insurance for others? I mean, I've had the hypothetical of somebody driving from the west side of my district on Highway 6 wants to go to NRE Stadium, Bryce Stadium, and may not turn on his or her app until he gets in the area where he wants to pick someone up. He or she, the driver, is really, on his or her way to get a pickup, but is not actually doing it. Now, I know that the Costello Amendment purports to require them to turn their app on, but the question is whether they'll do it. It does leave room for there to be a public safety, a public responsibility issue.
And so, what was your question?
Well, the question is, if you talk to insurance companies about whether they think it's any problem to have the bifurcated system, the company system and the individual system.
Not so far.
You haven't talked to them?
No, we did speak to the companies, but they did not indicate that there was a problem. There was a situation that happened in California that I'm sure you've read about where a little girl was run over. And this was before the driver actually had a passenger in his car. He was en route, and his personal insurance ended up covering that because he was not officially employed in going and picking up a passenger or in any way operating as a vehicle for hire. Most of what you saw in the media was, oh, they refused to cover. That's actually not true. The claim was paid, and it was paid by his personal insurance because it was not yet a commercial trip.
Thank you.
Councilmember Christie.
Madam Director, doesn't Uber Lyft have some kind of $1 million umbrella policy? And does that affect individual drivers?
Their policy is an app-on, app-off policy, and yes, it's $1 million of automobile that actually falls down to cover the drivers at any time, from the time the app is on to the time that app is off. What Councilmember Costello's amendment has done is it has said, if for any reason the app becomes disabled and gets turned off, or that driver decides to turn it off, or the passenger tells him to turn it off, until he reaches his final destination, he is covered by Uber's $1 million insurance.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bradford.
Thank you, Mayor. As has been said, I think that Councilman Costello's amendment certainly moves us in the right direction. And Stephen, I'll certainly give an affirm vote on your amendment. But I want to just get on the record commentary which includes all of these are vehicles for hire. You know, that's what Chapter 46 is, vehicles for hire. Therefore, commercial use on its face, commercial use on its face. So how can we say that it's not a commercial application from an insurance standpoint? I think when we start cutting through responsibility, accountability, and liability, we're going to come right back to part of this discussion today, part of the ordinance itself. So I'm still not clear why we do not need 24/7. Well, let me back off. I can understand why, I don't agree, but I can understand why we may not need 24/7 insurance. But I cannot understand why you don't require commercial insurance. Because if I'm going to use my vehicle, you know, if I'm just a house guy and I use my vehicle once a month to make extra change, once I go vehicle for hire, that's no longer personal use. And it's okay that we have an umbrella policy, but if it's not going to be utilized in these particular applications, so what? You got an umbrella policy for $1 million, but when the lawyers come in court and say, no, that's commercial use, I don't see how we get around that, Mr. Pius.
I agree with you, sir, and I believe what's in the ordinance actually, I agree with you.
Well, now, when I get to that towing thing, remember that comment.
But what's
Proceed.
in the ordinance actually requires, if they are using that vehicle commercially, it must be covered with commercial insurance.
Okay, so that's not what Costello's amendment does, though, does it?
It has nothing to do with the commercial insurance or not commercial insurance. It's just the fact that the insurance is there for the entire trip.
But see, that's the point that I'm trying to make, and that's the point that when we move down later on, that's why I want to Councilman Martin to talk about the relationship between his amendment and Costello's. We've been talking 20 minutes or so about that relationship, and I think a lot has been brought to the table. So you'll hear more from me when we get to Martin's amendment subsequently. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
The ordinance as it stands requires 24/7 insurance. Well, while the app is operating, it requires insurance. While you're on your own, some people only have liability insurance. We don't require, the state requires insurance, so the combination of the two is 24/7 insurance. Councilmember Costello wants to make sure that no one goes off app while carrying a passenger and does not have the Uber or Lyft umbrella coverage. Councilmember Martin is seeking to add 24/7 commercial coverage. That is the distinction. The commercial coverage, we believe, as we've stated, that they have insurance coverage 24/7. It's whether we believe they must require commercial coverage.
But
We're all the same point on that.
My bell hasn't sounded yet. You're not responding, and no one has not heard to the point of using the vehicle for commercial purposes. This is a vehicle for hire. That's what chapter 46 is, vehicle for hire. You know, if I'm that grandfather, that grandmother, and I want to make some extra money and I want to run my vehicle and I have private insurance, and once I start vehicle for hire, most reasonable people are not going to argue that's commercial use. And most insurance companies, not a single insurance company that I've heard testified over the several months that they are going to take their private policy and allow commercial use. I haven't heard that. And we haven't gotten it from the city attorneys in office, a memo on this point.
Councilor, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay.
Sometimes I agree with you too. It's just, it's not.
Let's put that on the record now. But Mayor, thank you for your commentary, because I think that it's important that we have this discussion so we have a clear understanding of what's on the table when we vote on it. We can still vote no or yes, but let's understand the issue. And I think we understand the issue much better now that we've had this last 20, 30 minute discussion. I stand down. Thank you.
Councilmember Lassiter.